Adam Schiff buried a top-secret transcript inside a vault for 8 solid years, but Mike Johnson just ripped it out to show everyone exactly what Schiff secretly learned back in February 2018. That was a full 6 months before he hopped on CBS and fed America the lie that plenty of collusion evidence was sitting right in plain sight. The document flat-out proved there was zero evidence he got the briefing. He fully knew the reality, and he hit the TV studios anyway. Mike Johnson hauled that exact transcript into the hearing room, and in 40 flat minutes, the burning question 330 million Americans have screamed for 6 years, "Where is the proof?" finally got its brutal answer. Hit that like button, because you are about to witness what goes down when a hidden intelligence file slams headfirst into 6 years of cable news spin and the transcript walks away, the undisputed winner. Mr. Speaker, I was a federal prosecutor long before you even made state legislator. I threw a real Russian spy in a cell, not the imaginary ones your side dreams up. I ran the Intel Committee, I spearheaded the impeachment of a crooked president, and I was on the January 6th panel. And now, I'm taking questions from a guy who voted to scrap a presidential election over tinfoil hat theories that'd fail a freshman law exam. Adam Schiff was 6 minutes deep into an opening statement that hit exactly like a closing argument, with every single sentence carrying heavy weight. Every phrase was engineered to pump up his own resume, while completely trashing the guy holding the gavel. This House Select hearing on classified intel handling kicked off in Capitol Room H 313. C-SPAN broadcast it live, with every single network flashing a split screen. It dragged Schiff right back to the very chamber he abandoned when he snagged his Senate seat. In 2024, he sat there at the witness table, acting like a guy who still owned the place. With all due respect, Mr. Exploded, Speaker, I've been in rooms where evidence actually matters. This isn't one of them. The Democrat gallery behind him let out a noise, that sharp, rehearsed cheer of people validating a resume they already swallowed whole. But the politician who built his brand in rooms where evidence matters had literally just been slapped with a formal censure by the U.S. House for lying to the country. He went on TV bragging about having proof that 4 distinct federal probes concluded was a total ghost. And right now, he was sitting directly under the crosshairs of a declassified FBI whistleblower report, accusing him of greenlighting top-secret national security leaks just to kneecap a sitting president. Speaker Mike Johnson sat dead center in a dark suit and a red tie. He had the cold look of a former constitutional law professor grading a student's failing exam paper. He knew the road ahead was going to be rough, and he actively chose to play it polite. Because being polite, in a bloodbath like this, is 1,000 times more devastating than being angry. His massive, color-coded binder sat right there on the desk, but tucked inside a separate folder, stamped with a strict classification mark, was a file the Director of National Intelligence declassified specifically for this takedown at exactly 6:47 a.m. That morning, a piece of paper absolutely no one in that room had laid eyes on except Johnson, the committee lawyer, and the DNI. Senator, I appreciate that you brought up evidence a few times. He flipped the binder open. The 20th of March 2017. NBC, Meet the Press. You stated, there is circumstantial evidence of collusion. No warm-up, no sugarcoating, just the raw quote. The very first punch landed hard. Schiff's poker face held steady. That icy, prosecutorial glare. The mask of a guy who spent 2 decades training his facial muscles to show absolutely nothing in court. It was highly professional, heavily rehearsed, and running at an effort level that to anyone who actually reads body language was basically 15% too intense. The fake swagger of a guy pretending he isn't sweating, trying just a little harder than a truly fearless guy ever would. Johnson stared at the quote on the paper. looked up at Schiff, and then addressed the room. "Let's talk about the evidence, Senator, because I have your exact words. Right here. I have the massive investigations that followed your words, and sitting right in the middle, I have the secret intel your committee kept buried from the public. Senator, I am going to read your media hits in chronological order. Then, I will read the official findings of the probes that tore those statements apart. And finally, I am going to expose what sat in the shadows between them." He read the first quote again. "The 20th of March 2017. There is circumstantial evidence of collusion." Circumstantial. That's a slippery legal word. It means indirect. Meaning, I don't have hard proof, but I have a hunch. It's a safety net. And back then, Senator, playing it safe, made sense because the probe was fresh. Hedging your bets was reasonable. He grabbed a second sheet of paper. 3 days later, the 23rd of March, 2017. MSNBC. MTP Daily. Chuck Todd asks if you are banking entirely on a circumstantial case. You respond, and I am quoting verbatim, "No, there is evidence that is not circumstantial, and it is very much worthy of investigation." He slapped the second quote down next to the first. 3 days apart. In 72 hours, Senator, circumstantial magically evolved into not circumstantial. The safety net vanished. You escalated from vague hints to hard evidence in 3 days, without a single shred of new public information dropping. Schiff's right hand instinctively grabbed his pen, the classic lawyer's security blanket. The physical object attorneys grip when they desperately need a barrier between themselves and the room. The plastic pen started twirling between his thumb and index finger. Nothing crazy, just the slow, grinding spin of a tool being used to bleed off nervous energy that had nowhere else to go. Johnson pulled a third piece of paper. August 2018, CBS News. I think there is plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight. Plenty. In plain sight. Senator, those aren't guesses. Those are strict guarantees. Those are the words of former prosecutor, which you love to remind us you are only drops when he is fully ready to take a case to trial. The pen stopped spinning completely. Schiff's thumb dug hard into the plastic cap. The pressure was totally hidden from the live audience, but it was glaringly obvious on the C-SPAN close-up camera. The white edge of a thumbnail violently crushing down on a plastic pen, the subconscious reaction of a man applying brutal force to something that can't fight back. April 2019, 1 month after the Mueller report dropped. I have been very clear over the past year and a half that there is ample evidence of collusion in plain sight. Ample. Not a little. Not suggestive. Ample. He dropped the pen on the wooden desk. It wasn't a dramatic slam, just the silent surrender of a hand that realized squeezing a piece of plastic wasn't saving him anymore. The pen just sat there, dead between his hands. The first line of defense totally failed. Senator, let me walk that timeline back to you. March 2017, circumstantial. 3 days later, not circumstantial. August 2018, plenty in plain sight. April 2019, ample. Over 2 long years, your words escalated from cautious to absolute, from a loose theory to dead certainty, from indirect to in plain sight. Now, let me read what the actual investigators found. He lined up a fresh row of documents right underneath the quotes, 2 distinct rows, quotes sitting on top, hard facts sitting on the bottom. Robert Mueller's special counsel report, March 2019, 2 years of digging, 2,800 subpoenas, 500 witnesses, 500 search warrants. Conclusion. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired, or coordinated with the Russian government. Did not establish. Schiff's jaw locked tight, that aggressive cross-examination jaw he weaponized for 2 decades to radiate dominance while grilling people in courtrooms. Except today, he wasn't asking the questions, he was taking the hits. And that aggressive jawline, built specifically for offense, looked ridiculous playing defense. The whole setup was wrong. It looked like a guy trying to block a bullet with a sword. Special Counsel John Durham, May 2023. 4 years of digging. Conclusion. Neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Any actual evidence? Zero. Literally nothing at any point. Schiff's empty hands laced together, fingers gripping fingers, clinging to each other, the way a drowning man grabs a rope, because flying solo isn't an option, any more tightened up. The knuckles turned white. Not blindingly white, just enough to show the difference between hands resting and hands bracing for impact. Inspector General Michael Horowitz. December 2019. 17 massive errors and omissions in the FISA applications. FISA Court Presiding Judge Rosemary Collier explicitly stated that the FBI misled the court. Misled. The federal judge's exact word, not mine. Johnson pointed at the spread on his desk. Quotes up top. Brutal reality down below. 6 sheets of paper total. 2 years of TV spin. 3 federal smackdowns. 1 formal censure. Senator, on the top row sit your promises. Circumstantial. Not circumstantial. Plenty. Ample. In plain sight. On the bottom row sit the absolute truths from every probe that fact-checked those promises did not establish. No actual evidence. 17 errors. Misled. Now, Senator, I want to count some numbers for you. Because I used to be a teacher, and teachers love numbers. He dragged out a heavy, committee-backed media audit. Our staff ran a full sweep of your media tour between January 2017 and April 2019. The exact window you endlessly peddled your collusion evidence. The review flagged exactly 237 television hits where you threw around the words evidence, collusion, or conspiracy against the Trump team. 237 interviews across 6 networks over 27 months. During those hits, you explicitly claimed to have evidence of collusion exactly 412 times. 412 times. Senator, you stared into a camera and promised the country you had proof. Not once, not 10 times, 412 times. Mueller threw 2,800 subpoenas at this and came up completely empty. You logged 412 cozy TV hits and magically found plenty. Senator, either you are the single greatest undercover spy in American history, or you were sitting on national TV pushing a narrative that you absolutely knew was totally debunked by the intelligence you saw behind closed doors. The massive gap between these 2 rows of paper isn't a difference of opinion, Senator. He let the silence hang. It was the deliberate pause of a man actively dropping the temperature in the room. Unless you magically knew something Mueller didn't. Unless you, as head of the Intel Committee, possessed some golden ticket of proof that a special counsel with thousands of subpoenas couldn't dig up. So, this committee demanded an answer to one fundamental question. What were you actually briefed on? What did the intelligence community explicitly tell you behind locked doors about the reality of this evidence? He slid his hand directly into the classified sleeve of his binder, the one stamped with the red control marks. The exact file unsealed just hours ago at 647 a.m. The Director of National Intelligence ripped the seal off this document just for today. It is an official intelligence community briefing summary, dated the 14th of February 2018. The atmosphere in the room completely shifted. Not the noise, but the actual pressure. The air turned heavy, the way a room feels right before a bombshell drops and destroys everything that was said before it. This briefing was given directly to the chairman and ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. You were the acting chairman, Senator. He read it slow and loud. At this specific time, the intelligence community has not identified corroborated evidence establishing coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, beyond the publicly known contacts already reported. He slammed the paper down right in the middle of the desk, right in the gap between Schiff's bold lies and the investigators' cold facts. The document that finally answered the burning question the public had asked for 6 long years, did he actually know, has not identified corroborated evidence. That is exactly what the intel agencies spoon-fed you in a locked vault on the 14th of February 2018. Exactly 6 months later. 6 months, Senator. You marched onto CBS and swore to America, I think there is plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight. He locked eyes with Schiff. Senator, you weren't simply mistaken. Being mistaken means you believed a lie that you didn't know was false. Being mistaken is honest. It is human, but you were briefed. You were explicitly told by American intelligence operatives, in a top-secret room, on a piece of paper you personally signed for, that 0 corroborated evidence existed, and you walked out of that room, went straight to the cameras, and told 330 million people that you had plenty. That is not making a mistake, Senator. That is knowing the absolute truth, and burying it to lie anyway. Schiff's eyes squinted hard, not with rage, but with the sharp panic of a guy who just got hit with something he never saw coming in this room. He wasn't shocked by the facts, he already knew them. He was in the room when they happened. The shock was seeing that piece of paper sitting on the desk, fully declassified, fully exposed, the paper that was supposed to rot in a dark vault forever. The smoking gun that proved the difference between I got it wrong and I flat out lied was now glaring under 40 news cameras with 20 million people watching live. His locked fingers, the ones clinging together for dear life, finally ripped apart. The grip shattered. Both palms slapped flat onto the wooden table. Fingers spread wide. It was the defeated body language of a guy who stopped trying to brace himself because the floor just gave out, and he had totally run out of valid choices. Johnson flipped to the next tab. Senator, let's pivot to the 26th of September 2019. The day you decided to read a completely fake, doctored version of President Trump's call with Ukrainian President Zelensky straight into the official congressional record. He ripped out 2 transcripts and laid them out side by side. On the left is the real White House transcript, fully released and totally public. And on the right is the fairy tale you aggressively read out loud at the hearing. He read directly from Schiff's fake script. I desperately want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. Understand? Lots of it. On this and on that. Then he pivoted to the real transcript, the actual spoken words, which absolutely did not feature that sentence. Words that didn't even remotely resemble that, quote. Senator, those words simply do not exist in reality. You totally invented a fake quote. You slapped the president's name on it, and you read it directly into the congressional record, sitting under the gavel, on live television across every single network. Schiff's rigid posture subtly shifted. Not a massive flinch the cameras catch, but a deep, structural freeze. His calculated calmness took on a harsh new vibe, extreme rigidity. But this wasn't the stiffness of confidence. It was the stiffness of pure prevention. His nervous system was violently fighting itself to stop from lunging forward, shouting, or screaming an objection. Stifling that panic burned up all the mental energy he usually saved for keeping his cool. It's exactly like a massive concrete dam cracking under the weight of a flood, by stubbornly holding back the water. The act of holding back is a brutal form of force itself, and his mental structure was simply not built to sustain it indefinitely. When the media finally called you out on it, you claimed, and I quote, "It was meant to be, at least in part, a parody. At least in part, a parody." Senator, inside a courtroom, an arena you supposedly know well, presenting completely fabricated testimony as real evidence isn't a joke. It is legally defined as fraud. And you didn't drop this fake quote in a comedy club. You presented it in a formal committee hearing under your strict oath of office on live national television. But what deeply bothers me, way more than the lame parody excuse itself, Senator, is exactly how that fake script got engineered in the first place. Johnson dug back into his binder. This committee successfully seized internal emails from your top staff in the exact days leading up to that September 26th stunt. Schiff frantically tried to jump in. "Mr. Speaker, this characterization of..." Johnson sharply raised a single finger. His right index finger floated slowly into the air. The warning finger of a strict teacher. The quiet finger of a local pastor. A finger that doesn't scream a command, but issues an unyielding request. And that request carried the overwhelming authority of a guy who sat listening for 30 minutes straight without interrupting, now cashing in all that respect on one dead silent demand. Wait. Schiff's desperate sentence, the characterization of dangled dead in the silent air. Completely incomplete. The third word awkwardly hanging, waiting for a fourth word that was never going to arrive. His jaw hung open for a split second, then snapped totally shut. His stiff posture grew even more insanely rigid. An explosive internal email sent on the 24th of September 2019, 2 days before you read the fake script. An exchange between a senior staffer and your chief communications director, explicitly mapping out this fake stunt. I will read the devastating line aloud. He wants to read the summary version, not the boring verbatim transcript. We fully know it will get clipped by the media as the real thing. By the time the slow correction cycle catches up, the fake clip will have 10 million views. The viral clip travels before the truth gets out. He slapped the email flat on the desk. The clip travels before the correction. Senator, your own team completely knew. They knew the fabricated dialogue would broadcast. They knew the networks would aggressively clip it. They knew that fake viral clip would get blasted as if it were the legitimate call, and they intentionally engineered it that way. That is absolutely not a sloppy miscommunication. That is a calculated, dirty strategy. The core game plan is simple. Lie to the camera, fully knowing the juicy lie will sprint much faster than the boring correction. And by the time the actual truth arrives, the lie has already inflicted maximum damage. The silent room fully absorbed that toxic phrase. The clip travels before the correction. That phrase was the true scandal. It wasn't the parody excuse. It wasn't a minor media correction. It was the deliberate blueprint of making a massive lie outrun reality. And once Johnson dragged that playbook into the light, you could clearly see it baked into everything Schiff had done for 6 years. Every single I have seen, absolute evidence hit on cable news was a viral clip engineered to travel before the truth surfaced. Every arrogant claim of plenty and ample, and in plain sight, was nothing but a rapid-fire clip racing across the internet, carefully timed to drop before Mueller, Durham, or Horowitz could ever step up to nuke it. That playbook was his entire political career, and Johnson just perfectly summarized it. I also need to heavily address one more blatant claim you pushed, Senator. Right before the impeachment circus kicked off, you looked reporters in the eye and stated, quoting directly, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower." Meanwhile, your staff had actively colluded with that exact whistleblower long before the complaint was even filed. You purposely misled the American public about your own office's hidden role in launching the exact impeachment you personally led. Senator, this toxic pattern is undeniably clear. Say the massive lie on camera. Let the fake clip explode. Issue a quiet correction weeks later, after the damage is completely done, and pray the truth never catches up. The fake parody excuse didn't catch up for weeks. The blatant whistleblower lie didn't catch up for months. The I-hold secret evidence scam didn't catch up for 6 incredibly long years. But guess what? It is finally catching up right now. On the 21st of June 2023, the U.S. House of Representatives voted 213 to 209 to officially censure you. Senator, the harsh resolution firmly stated you were punished for, and I am reading the exact legal text, misleading the American public, and for conduct unbecoming of an elected member of the House of Representatives. You stood right there in the well of this chamber. The Speaker aggressively read the stinging resolution to your face. Furious Democrats chanted shame. It was a permanent, formal, on-the-record determination by majority vote that you had conned the American people. He paused. And right after that humiliation, you instantly hauled in $8.1 million, not over a slow calendar year, not across a financial quarter. A massive $8.1 million instantly flooded your accounts in the direct aftermath of that censure, all from small-dollar grassroots donors, people who falsely believed you were a hero. He yanked 2 more pages and slammed them side by side. The official censure text on the left, a glaring campaign fundraising email sitting on the right. Senator, this committee's analysts carefully compared the dramatic language in your post-censure fundraising blasts directly against the factual text of the resolution. Let me show the committee exactly what massive lies your loyal donors were fed. The legal resolution explicitly says misleading the American public. Your fundraising email wildly claims you were censured for standing up to Donald Trump. The formal resolution strictly says conduct unbecoming of an elected member. Your email begs for cash, claiming you were punished for defending democracy. The official resolution brutally cites falsehoods, misrepresentations, and abuses of sensitive information. Your email cries you were targeted by MAGA extremists just for telling the truth. Senator, that official censure text is 4 entire pages long. Not one single sentence mentions standing up to Trump. Not one single sentence praises you for defending democracy. Not one single line ever uses the phrase, telling the truth. The legally binding resolution outright declares that you lied. Your desperate fundraising blasts explicitly told your base you were crucified for telling the truth. Schiff's robotic composure. The exact same fake calm running at a 15% panicked overcorrection back during the opening shots, that fumbled a plastic pen in round 2, that violently stiffened up in round 3, was now fully exposed to absolutely everyone in the room, not just the TV cameras. The panicked overcorrection spiked to 25%. The stillness was way too perfect. The breathing overly measured. He wasn't blinking fast enough. The whole room could clearly spot a man desperately performing like he wasn't terrified. And that highly artificial performance broadcasted the exact opposite of what he wanted to project. Your loyal donors, the citizens tossing you $20, $50, or a $100 bill. They coughed up $8.1 million. They deeply thought they were funding raw courage. In reality, they were bankrolling a massive cover-up. The initial con job was screaming, "I have seen the evidence." The second brutal con was tricking your donors into believing you were censured for extreme heroism instead of chronic lying. $8.1 million directly stolen using a lie about a previous lie. He shoved the devastating fundraising data next to the classified briefing transcript, the damning staff email, and the brutal censure text. The broad desk was rapidly filling up with receipts. Every piece of paper represented a totally different chapter in a political career, constructed entirely on the massive gap between what was publicly claimed and what was actually true. Now, Senator, I need to talk about something vastly more serious than campaign cash. I need to discuss a major threat to our national security. In August 2025, the administration fully declassified explosive sworn testimony from a veteran career intelligence officer, a registered Democrat who worked on the House Intelligence Committee staff for well over a decade. That respected officer testified under oath that you, Adam Schiff, personally authorized the highly illegal disclosure of tightly classified secrets to friendly media outlets, specifically to politically crippled President Trump. A totally separate FBI 302 file, which was also declassified, perfectly backs up this whistleblower's exact timeline. This whistleblower frantically warned the FBI on multiple occasions that classified secrets were bleeding out of the committee directly on your strict orders. He pulled the very last heavy document out from his thick binder, a detailed, committee-prepared breakdown of a massive damage assessment. The committee officially obtained this report directly through the Director of National Intelligence. It is a brutal evaluation of the real-world fallout caused by illegal, unauthorized leaks spilling from this very intelligence committee while you held the gavel. The explosive assessment positively identifies 11 separate incidents stretched across an 8-month window where highly classified, top-secret intelligence pulled from private committee briefings mysteriously popped up in mainstream media reports within 72 hours. Schiff frantically tried to interject yet again. Mr. Speaker, this characterization of the exact same defensive words, the third consecutive time. The lame phrase morphed into a nervous twitch. It was the pathetic default reaction of a beaten man whose legal vocabulary was ground down to a single phrase by the relentless accumulation of damage. Johnson didn't even bother raising his warning finger this time. He simply kept reading out loud at the exact same commanding volume, and Schiff's weak sentence totally vanished into the overwhelming current of Johnson's booming voice, fading out exactly like a tiny stream vanishing into a raging river. In an astonishing 7 of those 11 illegal leaks, the highly sensitive information was immediately scooped up and featured in hostile foreign intelligence analysis reports within a mere 5 to 9 days after the corrupt media published it. Schiff's normally booming voice, the voice that peddled the lie, I have seen evidence across 6 networks for 6 straight years. The powerful voice trained in courtrooms to project dominance at volumes calibrated for juries. That voice frantically attempted the word characterization for the third desperate time, and it totally failed, cracking on the second syllable with a harsh micro-tremor, not loud enough for the gallery to catch, not obvious to the committee members sitting 10 feet away, but loud and clear on the pristine C-SPAN audio feed. A sharp 1.5 hertz spike in vocal pitch, the totally involuntary biological signature of a strained vocal cord under extreme panic. A throat heavily faking calmness. For 40 agonizing minutes, suddenly slamming straight into a devastating fact it was absolutely not prepared to handle. The brutal vocal tremor lasted less than a split second. It ruined less than a single syllable. But the audio geeks at C-SPAN would totally analyze it later, and that harsh breakdown would completely confirm exactly what the silent room was already starting to feel. The ironclad prosecutorial facade was literally shattering from the inside out. Senator, I want to thoroughly walk everyone through one specific example so the whole committee grasps this toxic pattern. Instance number 4. On the 7th of March 2018, the Intel Committee sat down for a highly classified update regarding a sensitive counterintelligence probe tied to surveillance powers. That secret briefing was personally attended by you, the ranking minority member, and 6 other trusted committee colleagues. On the 9th of March 2018, just 72 incredibly short hours later, the Washington Post proudly printed a blockbuster article packed with sensitive details that the official intelligence damage assessment flags as absolutely identical to the classified facts laid out in the secret March 7th meeting. Information completely unavailable anywhere else in the open public domain. Then, on the 16th of March 2018, just 7 days after the Post dropped the article, the intelligence assessment proves that a hostile foreign spy agency actively referenced that exact same leaked information, attributing it directly to open Western media reports, secret Tuesday briefing, explosive Thursday news article, hunted down by a foreign spy network the very next week. That exact, devastating sequence happened 11 separate times, Senator. 11 secret Tuesdays, 11 leaked Thursdays, 11 foreign intelligence windfalls, Senator, that guarantees that highly classified national security secrets pulled from top-level American spy briefings, meetings that you personally sat in, meetings that you chaired magically bled out to the mainstream press in under 72 hours, and hostile foreign spy agencies gobbled it up within a single week. 11 massive breaches stretched over 18 dangerous months. He slowly placed the brutal intelligence assessment flat on the desk. The undeniable pattern is this. You got the secret rundown on Tuesday. The Washington Post miraculously published it on Thursday. A hostile foreign spy service weaponized it by the following week. He glared directly at Schiff. Senator, that is absolutely not a sloppy leak. That is a highly coordinated publication schedule. The heavy word schedule dropped into the silent room exactly like a guilty verdict slamming down. It didn't sound like a cheap political argument. It landed like an undeniable conclusion. The shocked room absorbed the blow not as a wild accusation, but as a cold, clinical description of hard facts. And stark descriptions are vastly harder to fight off than angry accusations, because they don't beg for your personal agreement. They just hold up a mirror and strictly state exactly what everyone is physically looking at. Schiff's plastic pen, the very same pen resting totally dead on the wooden table since he abandoned gripping it in Chapter 2. The pen that hadn't twitched for 20 solid minutes. It suddenly vibrated and rolled exactly 2 inches to the left. The piece of plastic moved entirely on its own. It was physically dislodged by a massive, silent vibration, traveling straight through the thick table's surface, transferring directly from Schiff's rigid forearms, which were jammed intensely against the hard edge of the table. He hadn't touched the damn pen. His locked arms, desperately trying to support the massive weight of his failing, fake posture, started to violently shake, a high-frequency micro-tremor, completely invisible to the naked eye. You could only measure it by watching the terrifying effect it had on nearby objects. That rolling plastic pen was the first piece of physical evidence proving that Schiff's biological body totally betrayed the fake calm his brain tried to project. Johnson slowly flipped over to the final, fatal tab in his binder. His booming voice completely shifted gears. It got deeper, vastly warmer. It dropped into the sad register of a local pastor who is painfully forced to deliver devastating news to his congregation. Senator, I want to look you in the eye and speak strictly as one sworn attorney to another, not as speaker talking to a senator, not as a Republican hammering a Democrat, just as one single man who swore a sacred oath talking to another man who swore that exact same oath. You went on NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and ABC. During hundreds of smug television interviews stretching across 6 long years, you repeatedly swore to the American people that you had seen the concrete evidence of Russian collusion. You aggressively claimed it was vastly more than just circumstantial. You bragged it was sitting right there in plain sight. You repeatedly stated there was plenty of it. You proudly declared there was an ample amount. Special Counsel Mueller dug deep for 2 massive years, 2,800 federal subpoenas, 500 interviewed witnesses, 500 executed search warrants. He totally failed to locate your magical evidence. John Durham aggressively investigated for 4 entire years. He never found your fake evidence. Inspector General Horowitz dug through the garbage. He documented 17 catastrophic errors infecting the legal process, built entirely on your so-called evidence. The furious FISA court publicly declared the FBI actively misled them. You were officially censured and humiliated by this very House for aggressively pushing your fake evidence. Your own top staff engineered a toxic strategy to guarantee fabricated clips outran the truth. Your desperate fundraising blasts blatantly lied about the real reason you were punished. Highly classified intelligence straight from your private briefings ended up in hostile foreign spy reports 11 different times. And the American intelligence apparatus, during a secure briefing you actively received and signed for on the 14th of February 2018, explicitly warned you to your face that they had 0 corroborated evidence of any collusion. Senator, deep down, I am still a teacher. Long before I walked into Congress, I stood at the front of crowded classrooms, and I firmly taught my young students that the single most critical thing any human being can ever do with words is simply tell the honest truth, because honest language is literally the only tool we possess to build any real trust between regular citizens who simply lack the power to verify massive claims for themselves. 330 million regular Americans had absolutely 0 way to independently verify your massive claims. They didn't hold high-level security clearances. They didn't get invited into highly classified Schiff briefings. They possessed no legal power to read the raw intelligence files. They had absolutely no choice but to place their blind trust in you. You sat as the powerful chairman of the Intelligence Committee. You held the ultimate clearance. You commanded the highest access, and you looked at them for 6 straight years, from every major cable network, beaming directly into every single living room, swearing that you held the smoking gun evidence. They naively believed you because, honestly, why on earth would the powerful chairman completely fabricate a massive lie like that? The final question, Senator, where exactly is that evidence? You bragged that you saw it, so drop it on this committee's desk right this second. You literally just claimed this is a serious room where evidence actually matters. If you somehow possess the golden proof of Russian collusion that 4 massive federal probes totally missed, that an elite special counsel armed with 2,800 federal subpoenas could not uncover, that the top intelligence agencies explicitly warned you did not even exist, show it to us. This is your big moment. 5 agonizing seconds. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, completely dead. Seconds. The most brutal, crushing silence in the entire span of these hearings. Sitting in a tight room, drastically smaller than the massive Senate chambers, where guys like Vance and Kennedy normally operate, which meant that suffocating silence felt incredibly close, which meant every single ticking second stretched out to feel like an eternity, which meant 15 dead seconds inside room H. 313 felt exactly like a full, agonizing minute. Schiff's ironclad prosecutorial facade, the exact same fake composure, sprinting at a 25% panicked overcorrection, that nervously abandoned a plastic pen, that fiercely locked up against a doctored transcript, that somehow absorbed the devastating fundraising breakdown, survived the brutal rundown of 11 classified leaks, and stared down a secret briefing document slammed onto a desk, bridging the massive gap between 6 years of cable news lies and 4 failed probes, finally hit a total system failure. The act didn't dramatically collapse. It completely froze. The distinction is massively important. A total collapse is loud and visually obvious. The entire audience watches it happen. A total freeze is totally invisible. From the outside, it looks completely identical to absolute composure. His face remained dead still. His hands didn't flinch. His breathing didn't change. But that eerie stillness was no longer the result of an iron will keeping tight control. It was the catastrophic failure of a massive processing system that suddenly slammed into an impossible question it was never programmed to survive, instantly defaulting to the only fatal response, remaining absolutely nothing. Schiff's eyes, the cold, calculating prosecutor's eyes, the exact same eyes that aggressively blasted the phrase, "I have seen the evidence," straight into the lenses of 6 major networks, with the absolute conviction of a politician who bought into his own massive narrative so deeply that the pure delusion completely erased the line between fact and fiction. Those eyes just stayed locked wide open, staring completely fixed. It wasn't the slow, drawn-out blink of a fighter shaking off a brutal blow. It wasn't the desperate, darting camera search of a trapped animal begging for an audience. It was the dead, unblinking stare of a broken man staring straight at the executioner, asking the question, finally realizing for the absolute first time in his 25-year streak of brutal legal warfare that the ultimate question literally cannot be answered, cannot be deflected with a snappy comeback, cannot be twisted or reframed, cannot be parried with legal jargon, because the devastating question is a direct demand for a physical, tangible object, and that physical object simply does not exist. And absolutely everyone in the room fully understands it does not exist. And the 15 agonizing seconds of completely failing to drop it on the desk are the ultimate, irrefutable proof. You simply can't show it, Senator. Johnson's voice was remarkably quiet. It wasn't arrogant. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't cruel. It was deeply sad. The genuine sadness of an honest teacher who just caught his student cheating and deeply wishes he hadn't, because it simply does not exist. It literally never existed. The top intelligence officials explicitly warned you it was a ghost, and you willfully marched onto national television for 6 straight years and forcefully swore to the American public that it was real. I am a teacher, Senator. I have caught desperate kids cheating on major exams before. Some cheated out of sheer panic. Some cheated because they were completely lazy. But the only ones I could absolutely never forgive, the rare ones that literally kept me awake in bed at night, were the toxic ones who maliciously cheated, got completely busted, dead to rights, and then turned around to scream at the entire class that the exam was totally rigged. You lied and told America you held the smoking gun. You clearly didn't. You got completely busted. And then you turned around, lied to your loyal donors that your righteous censure was actually unfair persecution, and pocketed $8.1 million. That is absolutely not a simple mistake, Senator. That is an entire political career. He calmly snapped his thick binder completely shut, pen pushed deep into the spine. No further questions. Schiff finally responded. His desperate defensive ramble dragged on for exactly 2 minutes and 31 seconds. It was easily the most highly polished response of the entire hearing cycle, mostly because Adam Schiff was undeniably the most practiced speaker in the room. A veteran talker who spent 6 whole years aggressively dumping complex arguments onto television audiences of millions. A guy who could effortlessly stack up a fake rebuttal the exact same way a master carpenter throws up a wooden wall, plank by plank, nail by nail, desperately trying to look rock solid and structurally load-bearing. He whined heavily about deep partisan motivation. He loudly complained that the explosive Durham investigation was itself deeply flawed. He boldly predicted that the distant future would eventually judge his actions favorably. He desperately claimed that the raw intelligence community's assessments constantly evolved over time, and that one tiny February 2018 briefing absolutely did not represent the massive totality of available information. He fiercely declared, "I stand completely by everything I said." His slick response was the desperate closing argument of a beaten prosecutor who knows he completely blew the massive case and is now spinning a fairy tale to the appellate court of public opinion, not trying to actually win, because victory is mathematically impossible, but just desperately stalling the final verdict, silently praying that the massive delay will somehow be mistaken for lingering doubt, and that fake doubt will magically look like innocence. It addressed absolutely nothing real, not the devastating briefing transcript, not the specific brutal language has not identified corroborated evidence, not the exact date, not the massive fact that it preceded his most arrogant cable news victory lapse by 6 full months, not the damning staff email, not the clip travels before the correction dirty strategy, not the brutal fundraising scam breakdown, not the systematic, deliberate misrepresentation of the censure to his own donors, not the massive national security damage report, not the 11 highly illegal leaks, not the bizarre 72-hour media pipeline, not the terrifying foreign spy agency pickups, not the ultimate question, where the hell is the evidence? Johnson didn't even flinch or react. He had already closed the book. His pen was permanently parked in the spine. He stood straight up. He methodically buttoned his suit jacket the exact same, precise, deliberate way he handled every single detail, the ingrained habit of a deeply disciplined man who firmly believes that how you execute the small things is exactly how you handle all things. He completely ignored Schiff on his way out. The very first explosive video clip to break the internet was the devastating briefing confrontation. Johnson coldly reading the February 2018 spy agency warning has not identified corroborated evidence smashed directly into the August 2018 CBS News footage of Schiff arrogantly claiming there was plenty of evidence sitting in plain sight. That brutal juxtaposition, the cold, classified reality completely nuking the arrogant public claim 6 short months apart, spewing from the exact same man. The savage edit was exactly 17 seconds long. It was aggressively shared 37 million times in the very first 24 hours. It was the definitive clip that permanently answered the massive question. For 6 agonizing years, where is the evidence? Had been treated like a pathetic rhetorical weapon, mostly used by frustrated Republicans. After the hearing wrapped, it was an officially answered question. The undeniable answer was, there was absolutely zero evidence. He was explicitly told there was zero evidence. He aggressively lied and said there was plenty. The second massive viral clip was, the viral clip travels before the correction. The brutal staff email aggressively read aloud, immediately chased by Johnson's cold-blooded fatal blow analysis. That is absolutely not a sloppy miscommunication. That is a calculated, dirty strategy. That toxic phrase instantly became the universal shorthand for the entire house of cards Adam Schiff had built. The devastating quote blanketed media criticism columns, journalism school syllabi, and press ethics conference agendas. CNN anchor Jake Tapper, The very guy who gave Schiff a massive megaphone more often than literally any other host during the peak of the Russia panic, addressed the fallout live on air. Looking back in retrospect, we absolutely should have pushed back much harder. We handed over a massive, unvetted platform. That platform was ruthlessly used, and the fake viral clip absolutely outran the slow correction. That blunt statement wasn't a tearful apology. It was a devastating, on-the-record admission, and a brutal confession coming straight from the exact elite anchors who actively built Schiff's political empire, inflicted way more permanent damage than any generic Republican attack ever could. The third explosive clip was the massive scam, the lie about a previous lie, the brutal side-by-side visual of the actual censure text, utterly destroying the fake, dramatic fundraising emails. This specific clip ripped through elite donor networks and massive campaign finance watchdog organizations. The catchy phrase, $8.1 million stolen, using a lie about a lie, became the absolute core legal framework that the FEC heavily leaned on when they officially launched a massive, formal review into whether Schiff's aggressive post-censure cash grabs blatantly violated strict federal election laws against fraudulent solicitation. The fourth nuclear clip was, "That is not a sloppy leak. That is a publication schedule." The brutal national security damage assessment. This terrifying clip aggressively tore through elite intelligence circles and Pentagon national security hubs with a sheer speed that completely shocked even the committee staffers. High-level ex-spies and Black Ops veterans passed it around with dark, furious commentary, using the incredibly grim, hyper-restrained vocabulary typical of the intelligence community. Absolutely devastating. If these massive security breaches went down exactly as documented, the responsible party committed multiple severe federal felonies. The real-world political consequences were totally instantaneous and completely structural. The United States Senate quickly voted to officially deny Adam Schiff membership on the powerful Senate Intelligence Committee. The final brutal tally was 54 to 43. Three furious Democrats, every single one representing massive states packed with active military bases and deep intelligence populations, crossed the aisle and aggressively voted with the Republicans. It marked the absolute first time in the entire history of the United States Senate that a sitting member was formally denied a major committee assignment specifically based on highly corrupt conduct committed in a prior chamber. Schiff had desperately sought that elite intelligence committee seat as the absolute ultimate capstone of his political career. It was meant to be the glorious Senate version of the massive chairmanship he used to wield over in the House. Getting violently booted off didn't just rip away the fancy committee title. It totally killed his elite security clearance access. It destroyed his high-level briefing privileges. It completely crushed the massive institutional authority that came along with it. Adam Schiff, the slick politician who spent 25 years building a massive personal brand off the arrogant intro as the powerful chairman of the Intelligence Committee, was now just another regular, powerless senator locked totally outside the intelligence loop. The famous brand was violently severed from its core source. Attorney General Kash Patel officially forwarded the explosive classified leak allegations, the brave whistleblower transcripts, the damning FBI 302 files, and the brutal damage assessment straight over to the aggressive DOJ Criminal Division for a massive federal investigation. The illegal, unauthorized distribution of highly classified national defense secrets, specifically under 18 U.S.C. Section 798, officially carries a devastating penalty of up to 10 hard years inside a federal penitentiary. Federal grand jury subpoenas aggressively dropped, demanding all of Schiff's massive Intelligence Committee text communications, private staff records, and detailed meeting logs covering the entire shady window from 2017 to 2023. This was absolutely not a polite, friendly congressional review. It wasn't a toothless ethics inquiry. It was a full-blown, aggressive criminal prosecution armed with limitless subpoena power and a hostile grand jury. And the ultimate target in the crosshairs was a sitting member of the United States Senate. CNN panicked and released a massive, formal editor's note. It was the absolute first time in the giant network's long history that they issued a blanket warning targeting a single specific source's total lack of credibility. The brutal warning stated, across the volatile period stretching from 2017 to 2023, CNN heavily provided massive, largely unchallenged broadcast coverage of then-Representative Adam Schiff's aggressive, repeated claims regarding solid evidence of Russian collusion. In light of the explosive, newly declassified intelligence community briefing transcripts officially presented during the May 2026 Congressional hearing, which conclusively proved that Representative Schiff was explicitly informed by the IC that zero corroborated evidence of collusion actually existed prior to his most emphatic public media tours. CNN formally acknowledges that our newsroom completely failed and should have aggressively and rigorously challenged those false claims. MSNBC outright refused to publish a formal, embarrassing correction, but they sneakily scrubbed 47 different Schiff interview video clips straight off their massive YouTube archive in the dead of night over the next 2 weeks. Schiff's dramatic political memoir, Midnight in Washington, published back in 2021, a massive runaway bestseller entirely constructed on the fake hero narrative that he valiantly bled to expose a massive Russian conspiracy. That book suddenly saw massive, humiliating store returns completely exceeding actual sales for 3 brutal weeks straight, right after the disastrous hearing. The panicked publisher totally postponed the upcoming paperback edition indefinitely. The entire core premise of the book, the arrogant claim that Schiff was completely vindicated, that the smoking gun evidence was totally real, that the federal probes were just corrupt cover-ups, was totally dismantled by one single piece of paper. A highly classified intelligence warning from February 2018, bluntly stating that the so-called evidence did not even exist. A warning formally signed for as received by the exact same guy who turned around and spent the next 5 years aggressively lying to America that it was real. Johnson refused to give any victory lap media interviews. When a desperate reporter finally caught him out in a random Capitol hallway, he just stopped walking and quietly adjusted his glasses. I taught school for a very long time. The absolute hardest, most painful thing a teacher ever has to do is grab a student and physically show them the massive gap between the lies they told and the hard truth. It is brutal, mainly because the kid almost always already knows. They fully knew they were lying long before you ever showed them the proof. They just crossed their fingers and deeply hoped that nobody with any real power would ever bother to check. He paused for a second. Well, somebody finally checked. Way down in Madisonville, Louisiana, Gerald Thibodeau casually leaned against the worn counter of his small, dusty bait shop. The tiny TV in the corner was buzzing. The brutal hearing replay was running on a loop. His usual Tuesday morning catfish regular was standing right there at the register, gripping a dripping plastic bag full of live shiners, just staring at the screen. "My old buddy Boudreaux told me a good one once," Gerald casually muttered. The customer just stood there, waiting. Listening to Gerald's crazy Boudreaux stories was just part of the hidden price you paid for buying his shiners. Boudreaux always said, if a grown man looks you dead in the eye and brags he reeled in a massive 1-2-pound bass, he damn well better have that monster sitting on ice in the cooler. Because if that cooler is totally empty, he didn't catch a damn thing. He just told a tall tale. Gerald tightly tied off the plastic bait bag, counting out the slippery fish purely by muscle memory. That Senator Schiff fella, He strutted around and swore to the whole country that he hooked the absolute biggest monster fish in the history of American politics, bragged about it for 6 straight years, yelled it on every single TV channel, even wrote a whole damn book about it. Well, today, Mr. Johnson finally popped the lid off that cooler. Gerald slid the dripping bag across the counter. It was completely empty. The loyal customer dropped his cash, pausing for a second right by the screen door. But here is the absolute kicker. Boudreaux also told me this, Gerald kept going. The saddest part of the story ain't just that the stupid cooler is empty. The absolute worst part is that the loudmouth completely knew it was empty the entire time he was bragging to your face about the monster catch. And he looked you in the eye and lied anyway, strictly because he desperately needed you to believe he was a real fisherman. The old doorbell jingled. The customer vanished outside. Gerald spun back around to watch the tiny television. Mike Johnson was calmly snapping his massive binder shut, sliding his pen right back into the spine, standing up straight, and buttoning his sharp suit jacket. Somebody finally checked the cooler, Gerald whispered to the completely empty shop. He grabbed a dirty rag, wiped down the counter, and started reorganizing the fishing spinners. The tiny shop smelled heavily like live bait, burnt black coffee, and the deep bayou. Way up in Middletown, Ohio, Crystal Atkins was taking a breather inside the quiet break room of the Brighter Days Recovery Center. The wall-mounted television was quietly blaring the news. Her co-worker Donna was sitting right there. The pot of coffee was dead cold. This mess hits totally different from all the usual political garbage, Crystal randomly said. Donna asked her why. Because all those other scandals are always about physical things those suits actually did. Omar siphoning campaign cash. AOC putting on a fake crying performance at the border fence. Clinton surviving by the skin of his teeth. Newsom blowing billions of state funds. Those are tangible, physical actions. You can literally point a finger at them. You can measure the exact damage on a spreadsheet. She stared hard at the glowing screen. She was watching Schiff's brutal 15 seconds of pure dead silence. The terrified, unblinking stare. The totally shattered, frozen fake composure. But this one? This one is entirely about a massive lie, a man told. He aggressively swore. He held the smoking gun evidence. He screamed it for 6 long years, broadcasting on every single network, directly into every single living room in America, and he totally made it up. And that secret intelligence transcript conclusively proves he absolutely knew he was totally making it up. Top spies pulled him into a locked vault and explicitly told him to his face that the magic evidence was a myth, and he just waltzed right out of that secure room, marched straight onto a brightly lit cable news set, and swore to God that it was real. She took a long, heavy breath. That right there is the absolute worst kind of evil. It's way worse than stealing money. It's worse than faking a protest. It's worse than blowing a budget. It's the evil of knowing the absolute truth. Because when you rob a bank, you only damage the few people you robbed. When you fake giving a damn, you just break the hearts of the fools who bought the act. When you torch billions of tax dollars, you just bankrupt a state budget. But when you hold the absolute truth in your hands, and you consciously choose to spew the exact opposite for 6 straight years, screaming on television to 330 million innocent people, you don't just rob them of the truth. You completely warp what they believe is real about the entire world. You brainwash them into believing a massive phantom is a real monster. And then, when the brutal reality finally crashes down, they don't just lose all their faith in you. They permanently lose their faith in the very next guy who steps up to a microphone and says, "I have the evidence." And the ultimate tragedy is, that next guy might actually be telling the gods honest truth. She aggressively scrubbed out her dirty coffee mug, blasting it with scalding hot water. No soap. She slammed it upside down onto the drying rack. That is the absolute real damage here. It ain't about the $8.1 million in scam donations. It ain't even about the highly illegal classified leaks. It's the pure trust. He completely burned up the entire country's trust. And once that deep trust is completely torched, it absolutely never comes back just because some guy in a suit held a dramatic committee hearing. Donna silently stared up at the glowing screen. She watched Johnson confidently striding down the hall toward the Capitol elevators. "Well, somebody finally checked his work?" Donna whispered. "Somebody always checks eventually," Crystal fired back. "The only real question is whether it even matters by the time they finally do." She spun around and walked back into the main group therapy room. 8 broken people sitting in a circle, desperately trying to keep their lives together. The tiny television just kept buzzing away inside the totally empty break room. "Where exactly is the evidence, Senator?" 15 agonizing seconds of silence. A terrified, unblinking stare. A totally empty cooler. The broadcast suddenly cut to a loud commercial break. "Listen, if you stuck around this far into the video, you just witnessed exactly what goes down when a highly classified intelligence file that collected dust in a dark vault for 8 long years violently collides with 6 years of arrogant cable news lies. And that devastating transcript loudly declares, 'The arrogant politician who swore to America he held the smoking gun was explicitly warned inside a locked room that his gun wasn't even loaded.' Smash that like button if Speaker Mike Johnson just proved to you that the absolute most powerful question in all of politics is also the most basic one. Show me the damn evidence. Hit subscribe for more brutal takedowns where hard evidence completely nukes, fake media narratives, and real classified transcripts absolutely obliterate arrogant television interviews. Blast this video out to every single person who spent the last half-decade constantly hearing, 'I hold the secret evidence,' and desperately wondered where the hell it was. Drop a comment down below right now. What was the absolute best fatal blow moment for you? Was it the brutal transcript drop? Was it the viral clip outruns the truth dirty strategy? Was it the devastating side-by-side fundraising scam exposure? Was it the "that ain't a leak? That's a scheduled destruction"? Was it the plastic pen rolling completely on its own? Or was it those 15 agonizing seconds of pure dead silence after he commanded, "Show it to us"? Smash that notification bell, because that classified transcript is permanently out in the wild now. The Intelligence Committee aggressively stripped his seat. The massive criminal referral to the DOJ is 100% real. The brutal federal grand jury subpoenas are already flying out the door. CNN was forced to drop a humiliating editor's note, and somewhere inside a silent Capitol hearing room, a heavy binder is snapped shut. A plastic pen is tucked cleanly into the spine, and a former schoolteacher is calmly walking towards the elevator, quietly muttering, "Somebody finally checked." The senator walked in heavily armed with fake credentials. Johnson walked in heavily armed with a massive binder. The senator dragged out 2 pathetic minutes of pure nothing. Johnson commanded 15 brutal seconds of absolutely everything. The senator arrogantly claimed, "I have seen the hard evidence." A totally empty cooler. That is the ultimate answer. God bless the 330 million innocent Americans who constantly heard, "I have seen the evidence," and genuinely bought into it, simply because the powerful chairman of the Intelligence Committee swore it was true. God bless those thousands of grassroots donors who got scammed out of $8.1 million because they were blatantly lied to and told that the brutal censure was actually a badge of honor. God bless the furious intelligence officers who had to sit back and watch their top-secret briefings magically pop up in the morning papers exactly 72 hours later. God bless the hard-working teachers out there who rigorously train their kids that the single most vital thing you can ever do with your words is just tell the damn truth. And God bless every single regular person who has ever put their blind trust into an arrogant suit, wielding a fancy title, a high-level security clearance, and a TV camera, only to find out 6 brutal years later, inside a dead-silent hearing room on a random Tuesday afternoon, that the cooler was completely empty the entire time. The fake viral clip sprinted way ahead of the slow truth, but the hard truth just finally kicked down the door.